All right, welcome back inside our proactive newsroom. And joining me now is Eric Alexander. He is the Chief Financial Officer for US Gold. And Eric, it's good to have you along. How are you?
Thanks, Steve. It's great to be here, and I'm doing really well. 2024 looks to be an exciting time, so happy to be here.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Glad you're along. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity to talk about use a bit of your knowledge to help people out there and sort of give an idea for investors to understand what a company will go through and especially when it comes to financing, because as we've seen, 2023 was not a great year for financing. There wasn't a lot of money out there available, but we're into 2024. It's a new year now. So I wanted to get your take on companies that are looking to finance projects, and there's a number of ways to do it. Maybe you can sort of take us through a couple of those ways, and we'll get into each of them individually. But what are some of the ways that companies will in order to finance a project?
Yeah, certainly. As I kind of look at it, that there's really, I put it into three categories, and they're not really independent of each other, but there's, traditional equity. There's debt, which can take a lot of different types of debt. And then, third, I have a category that I like to call, federal, slash state, whether it's grants or could even be loans. I mean, and, that to me, that's sort of the maxim of the availability of funds, for, especially junior mining companies who, don't have a, big balance sheet sitting there with a lot of cash in their treasury.
Let's talk about the third one first, and we'll go work our way backwards, because I think you brought up a really good point about grants, because there are a number of governments, whether it's in Canada, the US, or really around the world, that are looking for specific projects in order to help move along. And a lot of that has to do with obviously critical metals and things are going like that. There's also ones available for gold companies and copper and a lot of things that the world is still going to need. So is a company doing their due diligence by going and trying to hit those grants as hard as they can?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, the interesting part there is, as far as, let's say, copper as an example, that's just made the critical materials list in 2023 from the United States. So, there is the potential for money to be there, but it's sort of, real new, and we don't know exactly how that's going to look. So, I mean, there are avenues, and they do need to be explored. Absolutely.
And what about jurisdiction of where you are? People are trying to find local sources for everything, and no doubt mining is just like that as well.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. I mean, and one of the beauties of our project out in Wyoming, again,
Mm.
United States, is it's a gold and copper reserve. So, and as I mentioned, with copper being on the critical materials list, that just, there's definitely a you know interest in locally sourced materials, so we're certainly getting a lot of interest in that regard.
Okay, let's go on to talking about debt now, and so people understand what that means. Like, obviously, companies have value and projects have value. Is that where the debt comes off of them? Maybe you can explain that so people understand.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk about debt, I guess specifically we refer to it as project financing, project debt. So it's debt at that project level. So, and there's sort of, a couple of different categories. There's, the big institutional banks who can lend money. There's private equity firms, who typically, will lend money sort of at a different interest rates and some different terms, and the big banks. As you continue down the list, in our case, for instance, there's the original equipment manufacturers, the OEMs who will be, supplying or, potentially supplying the necessary equipment for the construction of a plant. They also have the ability to guarantee loans, through their, independent sovereign wealth funds. And there's even the commodity traders. So there's a scenario where companies can sell forward a certain amount of material, and then and so you get cash up front, to finance the startup of a project. But then
Mhm.
that, in lieu of making cash payments, you'd be physically setting product over, probably the first few years of production.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And let's talk about the first bucket, because that's probably the most interesting one of people, the one people are most familiar with.
Yeah, again, that's traditional equity, issuance of, common shares. I mean, in a company stock. I mean, the hardest part, or maybe the biggest disadvantage, for companies of, it's like our size, and when I kind of refer to as junior mining companies, is typically the overall market cap of the company is, potentially lower than the amount you're looking to finance for a project. So to get that financing all through the issuance of equity, you're potentially causing severe dilution to your existing shareholders,
Mhm.
because you'd be raising equity, probably, could be multitudes of times over your current valuation.
Yeah. And there's also a couple other, would you look at potentially, or not necessarily you as US Gold, but as in a junior mining company, would it be advantageous for one of the senior ticket companies to potentially buy royalties and things like that? Is there a lot of that goes on in the industry as well?
Absolutely. There's a avenue whereby some of these larger companies will make an equity investment into the company, as you're going through, let's say, the pre-development or even in through development, with the eyes on, a type of royalty structure, potentially, as you mentioned, or some type of even, joint venture, or even, merger, or purchase of the asset, can boil into that as well.
Yeah. Let's talk quickly about US Gold, because obviously that's what you know very well. And I know that there's a lot of
Certainly.
work going, there's a lot of work going on in 2024 for this company. And a lot of what you've talked about is on your brain as well as you move forward.
Yeah, yeah, no, thanks. So, I mean, at US Gold, I mean, right now our primary focus is on our asset in Southeast Wyoming, just outside of Cheyenne. It's called the Copper King, or Gold Corp project. And it's a right now we've got a reserve, a copper and gold reserve, 1 million ounces of gold and 248 million pounds of copper. And that was in our pre-feasibility study that was published in late 2021. And we've been going through the permitting process. So the one really unique feature of this project is we are entirely on state of Wyoming and private land. So we do not have the involvement of the United States federal government, which, so all of our permitting and regulatory processes is through the state of Wyoming. So that's been, advantageous, and working with the state has really been beneficial for us.
Absolutely. Well, I know there's a lot of work ahead, and Erica, we really appreciate your time to talk to us about what's going on at your project, obviously, but more importantly, giving some insight into the world of mining, because it's a challenging one, but one that's so desperately needed. So we really appreciate your time again. Thank you, Eric.
No, thanks, Steve. Really appreciate it. Good talking with you. Take
All
care.
right, Eric Alexander. He is the CFO for US Gold.